Welcome to the very first edition of BOTC World Cup Weekly. I am your host, Dakota. You will know me from various games of Blood on the Clocktower and also this little thing called the TPI Sunday Stream. You may have heard of it once or twice. Who knows? This is BOTC Weekly, your weekly rundown of all the Blood on the Clocktower World Cup games. I think I just called this podcast two separate things there. BOTC World Cup Weekly. Professional. I am joined by two of my favorite people in the whole wide world. That is Jamie, Jamsy. Boom, Jamsy. Say hello, Boom, Jamsy.
Hello.
And the alleged one themselves, Alejo.
Delighted to be here.
Wonderful. So, the whole premise of this, if you're not aware of what's going on in the Blood on the Clocktower community, the Blood on the Clocktower community is currently in the midst of the first ever, every 4 years, no, that's not true, World Cup of Blood on the Clocktower. 64 scripts are being pitted against one another to find the best script of base 4. We don't know why we're doing this. We're doing this for the funs of it, I guess, to see all these cool scripts and maybe get some scripts to play later down the line. Refine some scripts. Find some fun games of Clocktower. We're doing it for the sport.
I think we're doing it because Ben Burns had a fun idea.
Yeah, we were bored, so we decided to do this fun thing. That makes sense to me. Anyways, the World Cup is, like I said, 64 scripts going against each other in a head-to-head format. And we had the first two games this weekend. We are recording this on Sunday, April the 3rd, 2022. You should be hearing it relatively soon after. And we had the very first two games. On Thursday, we had the horrifying spectacle of public executions versus Outed Evil. And just yesterday, we had They Think It's All Over versus Storyteller's Nightmare. This upcoming week, we'll have 4 more games, and we will talk about those in just a little bit, but shall we get started with our first two matchups?
Let's do it.
Wonderful. So, on Thursday, at the very beginning of this whole endeavor, this long endeavor that for some reason we decided to cover, adding more work to ourselves, we saw the horrifying spectacle of public executions go one-on-one with Outed Evil. This was a series of games, to set the stage, that both scripts had to be re-racked at least once because of how short the games were. I think there's some interesting things to go through on these games. I think there's some interesting things that happened in these games. But I do think it's very interesting that the very first two games of this World Cup both had to go into extra games because of how short they were.
Sure, it was a really wild opening to the competition, wasn't it? We had was it a day 1 re-rack or a day 2 re-rack in the Horrifying Spectacle? It was an early day 2 re-rack in the Horrifying Spectacle. Then another one. That was just because the lunatic got sent the lunatic token. It happens. We've all been there, right? So that one doesn't count. But then we had a slightly more fun full game, and then we had a goblin win, day 1 goblin win in the following game after that, and then a game which went the distance. So yeah, it was there were some wild games. It was a weird way to start the competition, that's for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely an interesting thing to see. I think especially during the first game when it did have to be re-racked, it was on one hand nice to see the script played twice, and then on the other hand, when you're having a competition to evaluate scripts, there I think are some arguments that could be made for is it fair to have a script played twice when another script might only get played once, but then the other script got played twice too. So I think in that sense it was sort of a nice balancing act of we get to see both of these scripts being played in sort of a short format, quick re-rack type style. So I think that will help us compare them a little bit easier.
That is an interesting thing about this whole competition, right? We'll get back to these two scripts because I feel like we should go through them and just kind of talk about the intricacies and what our opinions on these scripts are. But the cool but also kind of scary thing is this is the first time anyone's trying to do something like this with Clocktower. We've had competitive Clocktower before, which people have opinions on that. But this is the first time we've ever had like this script showdown, long-term, overarching competition thing. We've had script competitions before, but nothing quite like this. So there's going to be precedent set throughout this entire thing, and I am aware that there is a rules committee currently talking about some of those things that you just brought up. How fair is it to have more than one game? Should there be a time limit on games? And all those things. But it's going to be interesting to see as the weeks go on and as edge cases get brought up, how the people in charge of this competition handle those things. But with all that being said, shall we start with the first game of Horrifying Spectacle of Public Executions?
Sure. It was. It's that was the game where the demon decided to claim cannibal and it guessed someone wrong, I think, which led to it being quite a short game. It's the thing. I suppose one inherent issue with a competition like this is that one game or even two short games often just isn't really that much to draw many conclusions about a script from. I've played the base 3 scripts with people, and weird things happen in these games, and it's like, oh, I hate this script. But then, that same person, you talk to them months later, and they'll be like, oh, it's my favorite script. So, I think that's just an interesting thing with the competition in general. It's just sometimes hard to get a sense, a hold on a script from a single game. But I suppose it's better than no games, right?
Yeah, and so I guess one of the things that I look at when I'm looking at that game in particular is what makes a good script. For me, I am a big fan of interesting interactions. So when a script has like some interesting interactions, I'm always going to be drawn to that script. And I don't know. I really like stuff like it's not on this script in particular, but I really like the Tinker and how it can interact with certain townsfolk roles. And I don't know, if a script has an interesting interaction, I'm going to be drawn to it more than maybe another script. What sucks about that first game was in my opinion, the good team didn't win because of anything they did or evil didn't do. The good team won because the demon just happened to take a bluff that is risky, and the person who died just wouldn't let go that they got the wrong roll. Cat zeroed in, and that's the other cool thing about this competition is you have to not only is the script taken in case, you have to take in the players themselves and who is playing in that game, because every player is going to have their own particular quirks and tells and ways they play the game. And something Cat does is Cat, like myself, tunnels. So it was just kind of bad luck that the demon picked Cannibal and it was Cat that died first day. I mean, bad luck for the evil team. Great luck for the good team, yeah?
Oh, for sure.
Jamie, what was your opinion on that very first game?
Yeah, it was really tough. I think even beyond whether or not Sam had guessed Cat's role correctly as the cannibal bluff in that game, I think something that made it even harder was he was specifically monk protected that night, and it was a Vortox game. So even if he had managed to get Cat's role correctly, if he was claiming false information, then at some point it would have come out that you were monk protected, so a Vortox wouldn't have impacted you, so you should have true information. So it just was a double whammy in terms of how much space Sam had for that bluff. And I thought that was really, really unlucky and really tough for evil going in, but I didn't feel like it was representative of the script. I remember watching the game and just being kind of in awe of how many really interesting interactions there were to play with in the game. I think having something like a boom dandy can be really helpful both for good and for evil, because depending on what the setup is and how much information people have at any given time, it can be really, really powerful to be able to use that to protect a powerful role that wants to live. And there were a lot of powerful roles that wanted to live. on that script. But yeah, it was a bit tough to feel like just, because of a stroke of bad luck that sort of led to a quick ending in the first game. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any other thoughts on that, the first run of that script, if we want to chat about the second one as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you have thoughts on the second one, go ahead. Go ahead, Leo.
No, I was just going to say that on a point that you were saying, I played that script before, and it was a radically different game from either of those two games. It was an 8-day game where 2 people died to executions, and we tried to execute someone every day. So there's a lot that could happen in that game. Like, we were in Final 3, and we couldn't conclusively rule out it being a Zomboul, despite the fact that it was an 8-day game and someone died every night. So it's got that potential for sure. But we can talk about the second game if you like.
Yeah, I think the second game was like another similar example of just really unlucky for the evil team, where you had a Zomboul game, you had a setup where I think the good team would have figured out relatively quickly that it was a Zomboul game. I think they did have a Godfather, if I'm remembering correctly, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
They did, yeah.
Yeah, so they had a Godfather, so they could have.
Aiden was the Godfather.
Yep, they could have covered up some kills, but at the same time, the Tinker would have only been able to explode in the night to either create a new kill or be killed in the day to allow a Godfather kill. So that was a tricky balance there. But you had an Oracle, sober, healthy Oracle, who immediately learned a 1 because the demon died, and then the Zomboul couldn't kill, so no one else could die.
I think that really put paid to the evil team. Obviously, you could get tricksy with the Tinker and just wake everyone up and say Nikki is dead, right? Which technically counts for both, but it's stretching it a little bit at that point. But yeah, I think the Oracle and the Zomboul is an interaction with a Zomboul dying on the first day, which was really quite unfortunate for the evil team. I do believe that the author is planning on removing Zomboul if it gets through. So I think I'm not totally sure. I think that's something that might be happening, because that was a little bit of an unfortunate incident, for sure. Kota?
Yeah, I mean,
what do you make of game 2?
Yeah, my thoughts on game 2 was it was a lot like game 1, but it just showcased maybe a different side of the many interactions on this script with that Oracle and the Zomboul. So what I like about this script is that with the townsfolk, right? The townsfolk are powerful, but is not your normal big powers that you normally see on custom scripts. There's a lot of roles like the Flower Girl, the Oracle, the Seamstress. Those are powerful roles, even this stage. But you have to work for it. You have to kind of piece out your information. And with game 1, we saw a bad bluff cause the end of a game quickly. And with game 2, we saw an unlucky circumstance kind of take away the guessing game, as it were, of the Oracle. Because with the Oracle and with the Flower Girl, you need more than 1 day of information normally. But it was bad luck that you didn't need that anymore,
Yeah, I mean, Oracle and Zomboul can be quite a rough pairing, just because the Oracle is usually like, okay, so one of those 2 people is evil, assuming I'm getting all right info, assuming etc, etc, etc. But with a Zomboul, there's only really 1 kill in a day-night cycle on a script like this. So that's quite powerful information for the good team.
And like you said, you have the Tinker there. But if you don't kill the Tinker, then yeah, you're still stuck in that position of, oh no. And then so something I've noticed about Blood of the Clocktower, this is like a philosophy on Clocktower, is good will pick up on things like if like the Tinker says, I was a Tinker, you have to make a snap judgment. do you believe that tinker or do you not? Because you then base your rest of your worldviews on that. And you can go back and change them, but at that first moment, as evil, you're kind of hoping that good doesn't trust the tinker. Because as like the Zambul, you know, okay, that tinker is good. But if Trow doesn't trust them, they can start building worldviews where I am good. It just didn't happen in this game, unfortunately.
For sure. Do we want to talk about the Godfather -1? It's a little bit tangential, but I think that's something that we don't really see often enough that Storyteller Ben decided to do.
Yeah, I do, because I have strong opinions on outsider modification. Um, I think so. The way I run games as a storyteller is if a the way I run games as a storyteller is I stick pretty strongly to a role helping their team, and I think a Godfather -1 can help evil team, but you have to balance it a lot because as a Godfather, you only get to do anything if an outsider dies. So you have to be very careful when you use -1 because you want the Godfather to help their team. So the question is, okay, how can I make this -1 help good? Is it because there
Right.
is a townsfolk role that, you know, while it's a townsfolk role might be able to hurt town in this particular setup? Thinking of like maybe a version, or in this script, I would say maybe the fool that can add to confusion, or the
Cult leader for an extra evil,
cult leader for an extra evil.
which is what ended up happening.
Yep. So like, yeah, exactly. That's what ended up happening. The cult leader was added in that setup, so that worked. That was a perfect -1 outsider for me. Um,
I
I
mean,
think that
the other
go ahead.
advantage of the other advantage of the -1 outsider, of course, is the extra bluffing space for the evil team because there's -1 outsider and no apparent cause for it. So that allows you to take an outsider bluff a lot easier. But I think that's a little bit less palatable on a script like this, where two of the outsiders are the drunk and the lunatic, right?
Yeah,
It pretty much only really opened up the klutz bluff, which the demon did take in the end.
again, like you said, it's all script dependent, right? On this script, I think there's enough of a balance that -1 can work. But I've seen some custom scripts where the Godfather is only there to add outsiders, right? Because there's nothing really on that script that could help the evil if you minus an outsider, and there's not really any really good bluffs for the Godfather to take. On this script, I think it works perfectly. I think the Klutz bluff is decent enough that you can kind of get by with it. I would like to see an outsider bluff lunatic more often, but that's just me personally. Um, I really think the script is good. Is it better than its opponent's script? I am not quite sure, but I think there's enough on the script that it at least intrigues me and makes me want to play it myself. The two
Right.
games I think were not the best representation of it, but that's kind of the way it rolls, right? Sometimes you're not gonna have the best game every other time, so it sucks for this script. But to be fair, I don't think its opponent's games were that representative of the script either.
For sure, but we'll get on to that when we talk about those games.
For sure.
Is there anything else we want to talk about on the subject of those two games? Or we should probably talk about the script a little bit.
Yeah, I don't have any other interesting interactions from the games themselves. They're kind of cut and dry. Good got ahead quickly. Easel got behind real quickly. Jamie, do you have any other thoughts on the games themselves before we talk about the script?
No, I think I'm happy to move on and chat about the script because I'm curious. I feel like we all had a similar experience of watching this game where, you could think of so many different cool interactions that could happen and could take place on the script, but we just didn't get to see those in play. But I'm curious for both of you, like, what did you see on this script that you would be like really interested to play around with? And then we can also move into like what sort of changes would you want to see on the script if it makes it to the next round?
I think the first thing to... Okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Leo.
Okay,
After you.
I will go ahead. I was actually just going to mention something that I think it was you pointed out earlier, Kota, which is the monk.
Yes.
Always interacts in a really fun way off script in a lot of cases. In this case, you had the monk selecting a player from who was the Vortox, thus making them, safe from the Vortox's ability. But you've also got the same thing with the Vigor Mortis and the Leech, who the monk can give solid info to players who would otherwise be affected by a demon's misinformation. Doesn't necessarily have the same thing with the Zomboul, because the Zomboul only really has beneficial abilities and only for itself. But yeah, there was the case where the demon was selected by the Vortox, which would have meant obviously they had to give correct info, but had no way to know that. But that can sometimes lead to the monk, which is a fairly, I don't want to say boring, but a fairly standard character in Trouble Brewing, becoming the most interesting thing off script, like one of the most interesting characters to take off script in a lot of cases.
I agree. So jumping ahead just a little bit, I think if we were to change the script and see the difference, like how it could be made different, I would get rid of the Zomboul personally, because I think out of all the demons, the Zomboul sticks out like a sore thumb. I think the Vortox, the Vigor Mortis, the Leech all has different poisonings, but they're all so unique to themselves that each of the characters and the townsfolk and the outsiders interact with it differently. And with the monk, right? I feel like that those three demons can be hidden just a little bit when you have things like the fool, when you have things like the monk, when you have these. My favorite thing about the script is how the townsfolk interact with each other. Besides the chef, you don't really have any starting information, and besides, like, there is no fortune teller, there is no empath, there is no beating you over the head with information roll. You have the chambermaid, but you have to kind of piece out the information and see who's bluffing what, and are they lying to you. You have the flower girl and the oracle, which gets information, but you have to balance. Okay, um, you have to balance who's voting and who's not voting. You have to balance how many people are dead. Am I poisoned? Is there a reason why I'm getting this information? Because with Leech, Vigor Mortis, Vortox, and specifically the Oracle, right? You have to really quickly evaluate: are you poisoned, and how are you poisoned? Is it because there's a Vortox? Is everyone else poisoned? Is it because you're the Leech host? Is it because you're sitting next to a minion on day 2 or day 3? It's I don't know. I really like the way that the characters interact with poison on this script. Flower Girl also acts a similar way as Oracle. Monk has a really good interaction with the poisoning on this script. Savant can be brutal if you're sitting next to a minion and a minion gets killed by the vigor. Um, so I like the way poisoning interacts with these characters. So I think Zomboul kind of sticks out because it doesn't have any interesting poisoning mechanics, and also it just sticks out like a sore thumb.
If we were to suggest an alternative, what would you say? So I suppose the argument for the Zomboul in the script is that the script is about executions, right? And the Zomboul is the demon that doesn't mind getting executed along with the Leech.
Yeah, I mean, so I would say if I had to pick another demon specifically, hmm, that's a tough one. I don't know if I would suggest another demon. I would suggest
Sure.
maybe adding a goblin as a minion, because that's another thing that works with the whole execution thing. Because a goblin, you figure out, one, is this goblin telling the truth, and the goblin of the mind getting executed as well. I think maybe a going completely off the grid, maybe what's the minion that does Rochambeau? Why am I blanking on that?
Psychopath.
It's Psychopath. I think
Psychopath.
Psychopath could be really, really cool because, one, it deals with executions. Two, it deals with not being able to kill somebody. I think that'd be a really, really cool addition. It's completely off the grid. It's its own mechanic, but I think that could be a cool addition. Um, yeah, I don't think I would suggest another demon
I suppose
personally.
the obvious choice would be the no dashi for the extra monk interaction.
Yeah,
But I do disagree with you on the goblin. But I will explain why when we talk about the second script, because it's a little bit more relevant there.
that's fair.
What do you think, James?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings because I really admire anyone who like genuinely tries to make a Zomboul work on a script because it's really, really hard. I think even in BMR, it can be hard to like set up a game in which the Zomboul is going to have like a good game and the players are going to have a fun experience. And I think as far, compared to like pretty much almost any other script I've seen where someone has tried to put a Zomboul on it and make it work, I think there's a lot of like potential for the Zomboul. At the same time, I do think there's a question of like just because it is better comparatively to a lot of other Zomboul scripts, does that make it like the right place for a Zomboul to be? And I don't know if the answer to that is yes right now. I did think, thinking about when Coda talked about having a goblin on the script, the one thing I could see being sort of interesting is if you had a leech who decided to host their goblin, but of course they wouldn't know that when they were picking. But that could be a really sneaky leech game tactic to like make the goblin the host because the good team would never know. But no, I do think I could see the benefit of the no dashi, thinking about that poison coming from the demon, but it is a little bit tricky, I think, with a Nodashi in particular, because if you look at the rest of the script, the only actual sources of drunk information or poison on the script are just the drunk. It's whatever demon, if the demon is poisoning, and then the drunk, and if somebody's being sailor picked and drunked because of the sailor, which is somewhat easily verifiable. And so I worry with a Nodashi that might be like a little bit too easy to track, just because there's not really enough drunkenness elsewhere. Like I think if I were to run this script with a Nodashi, then I would like want to make sure I had a drunk every time, and that could be tricky because you're limited in outsider modification as well.
And I agree. And why I don't really think Nodashi necessarily works, because like I like the fact that for the most part all the misinformation is coming from the demon, right? I think that's a really cool mechanic that when you're creating a script, most people think, okay, if we're going to have any drunkenness from the demon, we have to have 3 different ways that drunkenness can come from outsiders or townsfolk, and for the most part, that's a really good strategy. For the most part, that's how you make good scripts, right? I think that this script is fun because with the Vortox, the Leech, and Vigor Mortis, if you can figure out where the poisoning is coming from, you can start narrowing down who the demon is or who the leech host is. But then you have to contend of, are people lying, the drunk is in play, the sailor is in play, and therefore, and throughout. I think I would like to see a little bit more madness on the script, because there literally isn't any at this point. And I think maybe some madness can make the script play even just that more chef's kiss for me personally. But that's the cool thing about scripts, right? Is everyone has their own taste in scripts. Everyone has their own like ways they play the game, and I tend to like madness a lot. So, yeah, I don't know. That's the other thing I wanted to bring up, Jamie. So thank you for bringing it up. The way that this game is run, the way the World Cup is ran, is that it's a randomized. You random it as much as you want. Randomize the character selection as much as you want, but you have to keep it random, and then you get to make 5 changes, up to 5 changes. Ben did not use that many of those changes in the first 2 games. I think at all, really, he didn't really make that many changes. But so that's like a trait that the storytellers have. They have up to 5 changes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Definitely something that, and I think we'll get to this when we talk about the second matchup of games, because if you watch back the VOD from the first script that was run on Saturday, Capelli really took to heart, like, I can make 5 changes, I'm going to absolutely use that. I want to see this script run in a way where I'm confident in the setup and I feel like I've put thought into the setup. And not to say that full randoming a setup doesn't mean that it hasn't, had thought put into it. I think like one of the things that's really great about, especially like we see this in Trouble Brewing, where like 99% of the time you can full random Trouble Brewing and get like a really balanced, really interesting game. For those of us that have played or story told in person, like you'll know that, people are literally passing a bag of tokens around the room. Like you have agency over what goes in the bag, but you have no agency over where things are, where people are sat and where rolls are going to happen. And sometimes you're just going to have a chef 3 in TB because that's how people draw tokens out of the bag. But I do think that within this competition, it is really interesting to see how these custom scripts work when they come out fully randomized. At the same time, I think that, like, personally, when I'm storytelling, I care a lot about the players having a fun experience. And when games are being run on stream, I know that a lot of streamers also are invested in the people who have taken the time out of their day to come and watch that streamed game. That they're also having a good experience, they're able to enjoy the game. It's interesting, it's fun to watch. And between balancing those two things, I think it can be, it's always just an interesting thing to see, what does that actually look like? And does the script that comes out on full random every time mean that both the players and the viewers and everyone is going to have fun, is going to have a good experience? I don't know if the answer to that is always yes. I probably personally would lean maybe not, just because it's full random and you have agency. We are playing online, which means that you do have that power. And within the rules of this competition, you have that possibility of, I can make up to 5 changes to try and make this a more fun and more interesting game for everyone involved. So I think personally, I would definitely love to see that used a bit more rather than testing these scripts on a fully randomized setup, just because I think that will make for a better experience for everyone involved all around.
Agreed. I think that's going to be the interesting thing with this competition in general. And I would like to wrap up this script if you have any more opinions afterwards, and then we can talk about the second game and go on from there. But I don't know. I think it's going to be the interesting thing with this contest is we're balancing 4 or 5 different things. Are the scripts good? The storytellers themselves within the constraints of the rules. This is all live, so this is all in front of an audience. So there's going to be an innate playing up spectacle, right? And the players themselves, because this is going to be held across multiple different Twitch channels with multiple different player bases. And yes, while there is going to be an overlap of players, there is some Twitch channels on the schedule that don't have that much of an overlap. I know the Missing Pieces player base is pretty unique in the grand scheme of things. Alejo, you have a couple players that, I know you're not hosting any of these games this time around, but just in general, right, with your Twitch channel, you have some players that are unique to the different Twitch groups. Patterns has a lot of unique players, so it's going to be interesting to see all the different aspects of what it means to run a Twitch stream and run a game of Blood in the Clocktower on a Twitch stream, added up with the constraints that the storytellers are held under for this competition. So I am interested, at the very least, to see just what kind of games we get going forward.
For sure. It's an interesting one. That's going to come back in the second matchup as well, when we had 2 different storytellers for the 2 games. Both excellent storytellers, of course, but nevertheless, different storytellers with different styles. It's an interesting one, not just from matchup to matchup, and I don't know how many storytellers are going to be doing that on the other channels. And I don't know. I assume that you've got games on the Sunday. I don't know how you're going to handle that.
We do not.
You don't have any Sunday games.
Nope. The only TPI for the first round, the only stream of TPI that is running any World Cup games are the Mega stream and the Thursday stream.
Okay.
The Wednesday and Sunday streams are not for this round running any games. Speaking as one of the Sunday stream hosts, I would like to in future rounds, but as of right now, there is no plans. There is no Sunday games added to the schedule for the first round.
I see. Yeah. But yeah, there's some people use different storytellers from game 1 to game 2, and I don't know how that's going to affect things as well.
Yeah, definitely
But
makes sense because every storyteller is going to have their own like style of storytelling and what they're going for out of any game. And so to compare two games that are being told by the same storyteller is just, I think, inherently going to be a little bit different from two games. And we even see that this week to next week. Like the two games that were played on Thursday were both story told by the wonderful Ben Burns, and then on Saturday, you had one game story told by Capelli, and then the second game story told by Kohav. So I'll be interested to hear how we felt about
right.
that.
But that's a matchup 2 thing. Should we move on to game 3/game 2 of the first matchup? Depending on what day we looked at.
Game 3 and game 4. So this was a game that ended on day 1 with a goblin. This is Out at Evil. The script that was Out at Evil. I like this script. I don't know if I like it more than the horrifying spectacle of public executions, but I think there's some fun, interesting things on this script. That goblin win or loss, for depending on what team you're on, right? That was another situation where it just felt like, well, that was bad luck. So, okay, so getting into this, here's my question for y'all. How do you normally feel about day 1 wins or loses?
I feel like if it can be entertaining, right? Just on occasion. And the good thing about it is that you don't invest a whole bunch of time into a game that drags on for 2 or 3 hours and then you eventually lose in a disappointing way. Like, that's never going to happen with a day 1 win. But at the same time, from a storyteller's perspective, you put a lot of work into a setup. You kind of want it to last a bit longer. So, I mean, it's part of the game, right? You got to be wary of that as a player on both sides.
Yeah, I think for me, it's an inherent part of like characters like Damsel or Goblin or Cult Leader, or anything that could, or Saint even. Part of having that character and having that additional win condition on the script means that like sometimes inevitably you're going to have a day 1 win or loss. And I think that's okay. I think sometimes it can be fun. Like I've had some really hilarious Cult Leader day 1 wins, or I guess losses for Evil, because it's just sort of a silly like, oh, why not? Let's do it. Or like if you have some reason to believe that that player is good or evil. Like I think just voting for a goblin because like, oh, I don't really believe they're a goblin is very different from like, oh, this person has an empath 1 on them and I know it's not a Vortox, but I'm going to vote on it anyways. Like that, those are not the same in my mind. So yeah, I think that it's just part of having those characters on the script. I definitely value playing a full game, but every once in a while, it can be just a fun thing to do. And if you have a good social read on that person, or if you're evil and that's your win condition, like, yeah, go for it. It's part of the game. Like it's gonna happen.
Yeah. Do we want to give a quick overview of the script before we talk about the game in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, feel free to give that, Alejo.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think to me this looks like a very fun script to play occasionally. It's a very fun script to watch played, but I think that it has the potential to be a little bit tiring. We saw in both of the games that it really lives up to its name. It really does what it's setting out to do really effectively. I think in that first game, that day 1 goblin win, like 7 or 8 people claimed goblin, and in the second game, everybody knew who the evil team was, and that can be fun, but it can also be quite draining. So I think these are 2 very different scripts that kind of have a similar effect in that they both play out in the nomination phase, but in a very different direction.
Yeah, I think I am definitely on the opposite side to both of you, where like I want to leave a lot of space because I do think this script appeals to quite a few players in terms of like what you can do on this script and how interesting it can be. For me as a player, this script, I do not think I would enjoy playing games of this script, specifically because like what I enjoy about Clocktower as a good player is like world building, is figuring out like, okay, I have this information or I have learned these things based on like who has died or who hasn't or how people are voting. And then being able to actually put together a world of like, oh, this is who's evil. Like, this is who we should be killing in order to be intentional about like, narrowing down possible worldviews. As an evil player, I think similarly, I really enjoy and value having the opportunity to sort out like, okay, here's all the information that I can gather based on who I've talked to and based on like what I'm, social reading. And then given all of that, like, how can I push a world? How can I successfully build a world that works with all the information that's out there where whoever my demon is not the demon? And I think that this script, because the evil team is so loud and so present, like that aspect of playing Clocktower to me is not achieved on this script, which is okay. I don't think that every game of Clocktower needs to be like that. I don't think that everyone should play Clocktower like that, but that is how I like to play the game, and I don't think I would get to play like that in any game that this script could set up. So that to me makes it like, it is a script that appeals to a certain type of player, and that's okay. Not every script needs to appeal to every player, but for me, I don't think I would enjoy playing games of this script.
So I saw someone in Twitch chat, or maybe it was like a recap after Twitch chat. Someone said that this script has 1 to 2 really good setups, and the rest of the script or setups you could make are just kind of different iterations on that setup. And I think I agree with that. I think the thing that interests me about the script the most is the potential it has, right? Because I think at the core of this, you have a really good tool set of an outed evil game, which, like you said, Jamie, isn't going to appeal to everyone. I think if you add, like the Goblin, right? The Goblin is weird or different because there's no other game-winning mechanic, like extra win condition, than the Goblin. So I would almost be interested to see maybe if you could like, if you add more win conditions. I don't know. I think the thing that I think could make the script better than it is I think a saint would be really cool on the script. Not for the normal reason. The damsel as well. Saint or damsel. Either one.
There is a damsel.
Is there a damsel?
Yeah.
Do I have the wrong script? Hold on.
There's a damsel.
The
Outsiders on it should be. It's go in the images channel.
Yeah, I know.
There. Yeah.
Okay, so for the record, the script that we were given access to as what's it called? As people involved in the thing. Wow, this is a completely different script. What is happening? Okay.
Well, I wonder if that's the one. There's another script called Outed, so maybe it's just that one instead of Outed Evil.
But there's no script called Outed Evil in this thing. Like they just did not add Outed Evil. Yeah, actually, I'm looking at the script now. I hate it. I don't like the script. Like, no offense to the person who created it. I was wondering why my memories of the game itself and the script were clashing. But yeah, I don't like the script.
Okay. Well, that's a change.
I do think the things you said about it earlier definitely still apply. Especially in terms of like, I think the scriptwriter absolutely achieved what they set out to do. Like, they set out to make a script that was themed around evil characters being incredibly loud, incredibly visible, incredibly outed, and that is definitely achieved by this combination of characters.
Is that getting cut in the edit? Probably not.
So you want to know what I would do with the script? I would get rid of the imp. I think if you're gonna lean into this evil against the world thing, just do it. Because I still maintain everything I said. Look at the script now. I maintain everything I said previously. That there's only 1 or 2 like pure setups of the script, and every other setup you can make is just iterations on that. And that pure setup is evil trying to make as much chaos so you don't find the leech host. And with the imp, all that doing is kind of adding a little bit more chaos to it. But I don't know. I think if you're gonna play a game of hide and seek, you play it right.
I suppose the argument for the imp is that someone can be outed evil. Like maybe someone claims goblin, and then the juggler juggles them as a goblin and gets a 1, and then can suddenly become the demon. And that always has to have the good team questioning themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that interaction a lot.
You know what? That is fair. You've changed my mind, Alejo. Congratulations. Gold medal for you.
Same goes for like a psychopath or a boom dandy.
Right,
like
yeah.
if people are afraid of executing that, they're not. I do think I'm curious what purpose the fearmonger serves on this script, because there's not really anything else that's dealing with nominations. There's not a town crier, and like knowing that there's the potential, especially if you have a psychopath who outs early, like I don't really see any incentive for the good team to nominate at all, honestly. Because if it's a leech, you let the evil team kill to rule out leech possibilities. If it's an imp, like, yeah, you have to kill the imp, but I don't see the fearmonger really ever getting a fearmonger win on this script, especially with so many reasons not to execute. It feels very counterintuitive to have that particular minion, but maybe that's just a completely off-base take. I'm curious what y'all think about that.
Yeah, I suppose it's there for the public nature of it, right? But it doesn't really fit in because the fearmonger player, doesn't want to be outed. But I suppose it's more of a thematic thing, really. Like the evil team is supposed to be scary, and what's scarier than a fearmonger?
I think a lot of things.
I think a witch could be a really good replacement for the fearmonger on the script. And I think that it does two things. Where one, it keeps the outed evil nature. Maybe not the person themselves, but the character at the very least. And two, it can add a little bit more fear into nominations, which can cause which does the same as I think fearmonger is supposed to do in this script, being wary of nominations or going through executions. But it adds the added benefit of people are going to be wary to nominate rather than be nominated, and kind of make the town go to a standstill almost, where it's like, all right, we have to nominate to try to find the leech host, but what if I'm witch cursed? And
right.
While yes, the leech is weird, is an interesting demon where the more the demon kills, the easier it is to find the leech host. Even if you keep taking into account, it's Clocktower. Giving the evil team agency is never a good thing, even if it benefits you.
Oh, totally.
In my opinion.
The one interaction that gives me pause with Leech and Witch specifically is that if the Leech and the Witch pick the same player on the first day and they nominate, that's just GG right there. Which is frustrating because I actually agree. I think Witch would work really well. And maybe that's just like I have also seen an assassin kill a Leech host, so like it happens and that's okay. But it is definitely like a little bit of a feels bad where it's like, hey, we both have abilities that are supposed to help our team, but if we happen to overlap on the first day, like, sucks to be us.
I do say that maybe that it says more about certain play styles than anything else, right? Whereas like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the players who are playing customs, especially on like live streams, just don't look at the script, myself included, and don't like look at all the cool possibilities that could happen, myself included. So I don't know. I feel like that's kind of, it does feel bad. It is a feel bad moment, but maybe that's kind of on the player themselves to be like, hey, I'm the witch. I have this very powerful ability. Oh, there's a leech host there's a leech with an imp. Maybe I should just like pick myself for this first one and not nominate. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's not fun as a witch to not play the game right.
I agree.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that
also
goes a step further than like a snake charmer picking themselves on the first night, because I think that's actively saying to an evil player, hey, it's so unsafe to use your ability on this first day that you just don't get to use it anymore.
And then,
There's
I mean,
also
that's
there's
fair,
al-
but there's also like what 11 other players. It is kind of a drop in the hat of okay, maybe I probably won't pick the Leech host, probably.
right. There's also a magician on the script. How long is it? You know, uh, how long is the witch then? Are you okay picking yourself and just not using your ability because you don't know who the demon is? So you
Yeah.
can't get the demon host.
Okay, so I have a question for you guys about that role particularly. Then we can talk about the actual games themselves. What's your opinion on the magician?
Oh boy.
Okay.
Because I have
Uh,
strong opinions.
I am. I think I'm quite well known for loving, like, absolutely loving the poppy grower as a
Yep.
character. Quite often, the magician feels like a weaker poppy grower, but it does do things that the poppy grower doesn't. It's the fact that it's a weaker poppy grower, even if that were the case, is a that's not necessarily what you don't want, right? But I think the biggest problem with the magician is that as the magician who finds the demon, um, or finds the evil team, that feels a lot like being a good traveler going around claiming, "Hey, I'm your evil traveler. I know you're the demon," and then having the demon out to you, and you're just like, "Well, that sucks." So I think it's there more as a threat than like for its ability in most cases.
And that's why I don't like the character. Because in my opinion, it doesn't really do anything. In most games I've seen the magician in, it's a situation where like the magician themselves aren't necessarily going full force and like do it like because they don't know who the evil team is, right? The magician themselves don't have any way to like know. So when I don't know, I've always seen it as kind of like the evil team will find their evil team on day one, regardless of the magician. And there has been a couple games where there's been pause between the not the outsiders, the minions and the demon, but like it just it doesn't really do much in the
I don't
games
have
I've
the
seen it in.
I don't have experience, but I can imagine it feeling a lot like a lunatic, in that maybe it works better in an offline setting.
That's fair.
I've never
I
played with a
all
magician in person. So yeah, can't. I don't know.
No, I
I
haven't.
hate it so much. But sorry, Coda, I cut you off, so I want to hear the rest of what you were saying first.
No, I mean I think we're all in varying degrees of dislike for the magician. I'd rather just have the Poppy Grower. I'm with you, Alejo. I'm Team Poppy Grower. I think the Poppy Grower is one of the strongest townsfolk in the game. I think it is a townsfolk that actively makes one of the outsiders an outsider. Lunatic is most times only an outsider when it's in a Poppy Grower game. If you have seen any of my scripts, you know that I love putting the Lunatic and the Poppy Grower in the same setup because I just think it is the truest form of the Lunatic.
For sure. I think you and I have quite a similar philosophy in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, do we have anything else to say on the subject of the magician?
Oh yeah. I
Because
mean,
there's one.
I will rein it
Yeah.
in for now. But I think the thing that frustrates me so much about the magician is like beyond how it feels as a player, because it doesn't feel good to be a role that like specifically has to go and make yourself seem super suspicious to everybody that you want to be able to trust and get information out of, and instead you're like going and trying to act evil or trying to convince them. And the odds, like not only if you do hit an evil player, you have to be able to correctly claim minion or demon to them, which is super rough. Because if you go to the minion and you claim minion, they're like, well, you were supposed to be the demon, so you're obviously the magician, you're just outed, or vice versa. I think the easiest way I've seen to get around the magician is that if you're the minion, you saw two demons, you just go talk to your other minion, then your demon sees two of the three people they were told are minions talking to each other, and they can reasonably assume, especially if that conversation is earlier in the day, oh, those two are the real minions, the other person is the magician, and then you can go out to them. Between the two of you, you know based on the overlap of who was seen as a demon or a minion, who the magician is, like problem solved. And I feel like I've
Definitely, yeah.
never seen a game where like that particular interaction hasn't worked. I do have a great magician working story where I was a minion. I was the Cerenovus. I was talking to the evil twin on day one, and we both look and we're talking to each other, and we see the demon and the magician talking, and we're like, well, this isn't going to go well. And sure enough, the magician comes out, doesn't say that he's a magician, but comes out publicly and is like, I really think we should execute this player, our demon. He gets executed day one, like, because of the magician. So everyone trusts the magician. And it was like this whole, and I was like, wow, I'm really impressed. That was great play by the magician. It's the one time I've seen the magician like really work super well. And then evil still won that game because in all of the like hubbub about there being a magician, I figured out what the demon bluffs were. It didn't really come out that there was an evil twin pair, and I Cerenovus locked the good twin as a demon bluff. And everyone was like, well, he's claiming bounty hunter, so he must be evil. And they executed him, and we still won. So even though the magician did its job, like, it still didn't do enough to actually successfully, like, get the good team over the finish line. And that's not to say that, like, every single character in the game should be able to, like, do its job enough to, like, single-handedly win the game, but that, like, if the whole point of your character is to be able to identify and out, like, evil players, if you can do that and then still lose a game, like, I don't know, that feels quite, like, weak as a character. And besides that, I just don't think it's fun to play.
I don't think the magician is the weakest townsfolk on the script. I'm not even sure it's the second weakest townsfolk on the script.
Interesting.
Yeah. What do you think is the weakest?
I mean, the huntsman, I think, is the weakest townsfolk in Blood on the Clocktower. Its ability is sometimes, if you're very lucky, you might remove an outsider.
Yeah, however, I agree with you. However, there's nothing better. There's nothing more euphoric than a day one huntsman guess.
But it's so random. It's so arbitrary.
No. Okay, sorry. Day one, date like either finding your damsel on day one or randomly guessing. Because I've had two separate games where me and the damsel, me as the huntsman, and then one of me as the damsel, where me and the other person found each other on day one. And it just, chef's kiss. It's the best feeling in the world in this game. But every other time, I agree with you, Alejo.
Sure.
That's fun, because the closest I've come to finding the huntsman as the damsel was finding Jack Broom, who was bluffing as the huntsman as a minion, and I was extremely close to outing to him. And then I died in the night, and I was like, guess what? I'm dead. I was the damsel. And he was like, why did you tell me? And I was like, because you might be a minion. And then he was. So I do think, though, that it changes the way that you play damsel, which is kind of it's an interesting thing. It's not a powerful thing. But I do find that, when you're a damsel on a script with no huntsman, you're just like, cool, I have one job. Die. Like, be killed immediately.
I was once a huntsman, and I found the damsel during the day. So I was like really excited, and then I got to night, and the storyteller woke me up and said, "Hi, do you want to use your ability? Choose player." And I said, "Yeah, I'll choose the damsel." And the storyteller said, "Do you want to pick again?"
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's so sad. I've had that happen as well, where, I mean, I didn't actually get to pick, but I found the damsel. I was so excited. I was going to pick them that night, and then we executed the demon. I was like, oh, well, that works too. But yeah, anyways, I do want to, as much as we could talk about the huntsman and the damsel for hours, I do want to actually chat about, do we think there's any changes?
More note.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I have one more note, not on the husband, damsel, magician, and thing, but one more little thing that I don't like on the script. And I think that some people will know well enough what that's going to be. It is the poisoner and the leech. It requires a house rule to not completely break the game. But it gets worse because this has an alchemist poisoner and a leech.
Yeah.
So, you can find the leech. Great. Oh, I guess I'll just poison them then. Can execute them today. Happy days.
I think the thing that makes me really sad about the poisoner on this script is that, like, you can solve... Like, I think so much of the poisoner's power is not being able to identify until quite late in the game that there is a poisoner in play. And in a game where minions are so obvious and present and loud, I think that you could pretty easily figure out that it is a poisoner game as a good player, like much more quickly than you otherwise could. And in light of that, like you could also identify like whose info has been poisoned because there is literally no other source of poison except for the leech host. And there's only a 50% chance that it's a leech.
Right. We should move on to actually discussing what we have to talk about, which is that day one Goblin win. Then.
So this is my opinion on these games, and this is why we'll get to at the end. Why I think personally I would be voting for the horrifying spectacle of public execution. I have not voted. I will not be voting for any of the games this World Cup because I just think that I'm kind of on the inside. Plus with this podcast, I don't know, doesn't really feel like it's fair for me to vote. But I will say if I were voting, I'd vote for Horrifying Spectacle of Public Executions solely because the script. I don't know. Out at Evil played as a 10, right? The Goblin got the day one win. The second game lasted longer, but it was just more Out at Evil. And the games just weren't that interesting to me. Maybe I'm in the minority there, but I don't know. They just were they sure were games.
I mean, I think of the 4 games that were played, I think that the fourth game, Game 2 of Out at Evil, was probably the most entertaining game. But I think that was more by luck than necessarily the script, because I think that they both have the potential to be very entertaining scripts to watch, at least. Like you said, Jamie, I'm not sure that everybody would love to play that second script, but purely from that entertainment focus, I think that the fourth game was the one that it went all the way, right? So just based off that.
Yeah, I think it's, again, a really tough balance because I think I do agree with you that just from a watching standpoint, that fourth game was the most exciting one to watch. At the same time, I like really felt, especially for that evil team, where it was like, oh, it's like day 1 or 2 and your entire evil team is outed and it's just a waiting game of like until they execute, like, what was it, the leech host, I think, in that game.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel good to play in like that. I would be curious, obviously, to hear like what the players have to say in that regard. But like I was sitting there thinking, like, if I were in the shoes of any of those evil players, like I would not be having a good time.
Sure.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing that I sort of felt after watching both of the scripts was like I felt like with Out at Evil we got to see sort of the full potential of like this is what a game looks like on this script. I didn't feel like we got to see that with Horrifying Spectacle of Public Executions.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think the main takeaway I got from these games, and I do feel a little bit bad for not really having much thoughts on the Out of Evil games, as it were, but it was a really weird opening round, like opening first matchup, because both of the scripts didn't really get to see their full potential being displayed in its truest form. But then you had the 2 second games, we'll get the second matchup we'll talk to, which I think both of those games really, really, really showed the strengths and weaknesses of the scripts. I think there's a lot to talk about in the second matchup, that one that happened yesterday on Saturday. Whereas on this one, it's just kind of, there's potential in these scripts, but they didn't really get to like be put in the forefront.
Right. I think there's not a whole lot to say about that game 1. It was a day 1 Goblin win. I think we said pretty much all there was to say. But that game 2 also, for me, shows another, not necessarily a flaw, but something that I don't like in the script. And I'm aware that we probably disagree with it on this one, Dakota, given what you suggested earlier. And this is what I was hinting at. This is what I was foreshadowing earlier, which is I do not like Goblin and Boom Dandy on a script together. It's really hard for the good team to not be able to execute the evil team and just lose through attrition, basically. With the leech, obviously, one of them still has to die. for the evil team to win, but nevertheless, and I just don't love it. There's just too much of a double up of abilities there for me, and for them both to be in play, it's like they kind of do the same thing, and I don't think you ever really need more than one of them on a script.
So, my personal opinion on that is I think sometimes Goblin and Boom Dandy in the same game together can be a hindrance to Evil Team. Um, yes,
Sure.
I understand that. I think on a Leech script, you are 1000% correct. On a Leech script, I don't think Boom Dandy and Goblin should ever necessarily be on the same script together, right? However, I think with other demons, you can kind of get in a position that's good where you're like, okay, we have these two characters. We know they're evil. We assume they're goblin. With Boom Daddy, most of the time you kind of assess out who the Boom Daddy is or who the Boom Daddy could be. So now it's no longer we have to be wary of them. It's okay if they're not the demon and they're not the demon, and I trust you, and I trust you, I trust you. That's a very few amount of players that could be the demon. Especially with the imp, I think that can be very harmful for the evil team. Just like you said, by way of attrition. Because now, okay, they're evil, but we know they're minions. And you're dead, so you can't be evil. You're not evil. You're dead, you're dead. You two are still alive. Everyone else is good. Which one of you is the demon? I pick you, I just won the game. That's my thoughts on it. I understand that. I agree that in some cases it can swing the other way and be better for evil, but that's my personal opinion of why I sometimes enjoy Boom Dandy and Goblin on the same script, because while they are similar characters, especially if you use them only one at a time, they are different enough to me that they do the same thing while having different ways to interact with them, if that makes sense. If any of that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's just a personal taste thing, I suppose.
Yeah. Which is why
it's
Clock
just not
Tower
for
is
me.
so good.
For sure.
Clock Tower is so good because there's so many different ways to set up games, and even if you don't necessarily agree all the time, you can still have fun playing the same game because there's just so many different. There's like a cacophony of choices.
Right.
I like that.
I think that's pretty much what that second game came down to, right? The evil team was out at evil, and the good team just had to execute people until they figured out who the leech host was.
Yeah, and I think again going back to sort of the point I brought up earlier where like if you have a poisoner, you know that there's a poisoner and you can identify who's poisoned. If you don't have a poisoner, you know exactly what minions are play, which meant that like the first person to have information that didn't work was just confirmed the leech host, which was, you know, I think exactly what happened where Bardic was like,
Yeah.
I have the wrong juggler number. We should absolutely kill me. And that it's just, it feels like kind of a feels bad on both sides as well, because there are also going to be quite a few characters who like can't identify that they're poisoned for quite a while. Although looking at the script, I feel like the only thing really it would be like, oh, I'm a sage or I'm a choir boy, and at that point you're like, well, I'm probably not going to proc in the night because evil is outed and we're just sitting here, so might as well kill myself. Like, it's a bit, I think, rough to play in.
So, do we have anything else we want to say about that second game? We've spoken about the script, we've spoken about game one, and yeah, that we've talked about that second game in a little bit of detail.
I think the one thing I want to talk about before we move on to matchup 2 is I would like to know who you guys think won. Obviously,
Right.
Obviously this is a voting that's still open, and we'll have it linked into the description for as long as voting is open. We're not trying to sway your opinions, but this is a weekly recap, and one of the points of the whole thing is to give you our opinions. You know my opinions. I think that Horrifying Spectacle is a better script. I think that it has the most potential. But what is your opinions, Alejo and Jamsey?
You want to go first, or shall I?
Go for it.
Sure. I think I've made it fairly clear that I don't love Outed Evil. I've played Horrifying Spectacle before, and it was a really good time. So my preference, I think, is Horrifying Spectacle here. However, I think that Outed Evil enjoyed the more entertaining game in Game 4 than either of Horrifying Spectacle games did, which were both kind of good stomps a little bit. And I think that will work in Outed Evil's favor. I don't know which one's going to which one's going to win. I think it's going to potentially be almost a toss-up. If I had to guess, I'd say Outed Evil. I do prefer Horrifying Spectacle. It's just more to my tastes. I would understand people voting for Outed Evil because I think it can be on occasion the better script to watch. But I can't help but agree with you that my vote would probably be for Horrifying Spectacle.
Yeah, I think for me, what it comes down to is like, obviously this competition is very subjective, and it's all about trying to identify like the quote best script, and there's not really necessarily any definition of what that means. I think for me, what it comes down to is like what makes a script amazing is that, and this I think Coda goes back to something you said just a moment ago, that like one of the things that's amazing, like truly amazing about Clocktower is that there really is like something for everyone. Like everyone has different play styles and different ways of approaching social deduction games, and Clocktower is able to kind of like check the boxes for like all different types of social deduction players. Like if you're somebody who really likes to dig in and like solve a game, like you can play Clocktower like that. If you love the social aspect of it, you can play Clocktower like that. If you just like to sit in the background and kind of like watch people solve around you, you can like still be a valuable player and contributor to your team. And I think, so to me, like what makes a script good is when everyone feels like they can have a fun experience playing on that script. And I think that Horrifying Spectacle, at the end of the day, like provides that opportunity, whereas I think Outed Evil is like really fun for a very specific subset of players and can be fun to watch if the combination of characters is really like comes out right. But I think it is limited in that way, which is why I think Horrifying Spectacle is the stronger of these two scripts.
Shall we move on to matchup 2?
Let's do it.
GMZ or Alejo? No, Alejo wasn't. GMZ, were you in game 1?
I think
I was not.
I think it's probably best for me to take a little bit of a backseat on this discussion. So I will mostly let you two talk about this game. I did obviously watch the first one. But yeah.
So I think this is an interesting discussion. Because for all the other games, I watched them. I have not watched game 1 of matchup 2 because I was playing in it, and I wanted to have that mentality and that those memories by themselves. So matchup 2 was match 1 of matchup 2 was what's the name of the script?
It's all over.
They think it's all over, and then we also, obviously, Storyteller Nightmare. So we have the benefit of having the creator of Storyteller's Nightmare, Alejo, with us.
Hi.
We, for the most part, we're not going to name the creators of the scripts, because I think that you can very easily find out who created these scripts. I think they announced it during the actual games themselves. However, we do like to step back and try to overview things without that kind of bias. It's kind of hard when one of your co-hosts of the podcast is the creator of the script. I'm sure we'll also find this when my script comes up later on in the competition. Jamsey, did you have a script?
I did not enter a script. I am happy to sit here as our unbiased, friendly
the
moderator party. I might actually be helping to do some like logistical things behind the scenes, but I was like, I don't have time to write a script. I think it will be just as fun to like cheer on everyone, and then I like kind of just being able to sit here and be like the unbiased, like, ooh, let's just see scripts and hang out and be surrounded by Clocktower all the time. So this matchup, the Saturday matchup of this competition, they both had one game. They both went just under or just over 2 hours.
and they both were really, really good in my opinion. Let's start with They Think It's All Over. Do either of you have opinions on They Think It's All Over before I tell you my thoughts as a player?
I think it's a really good script. The script author sent it to me before the matchup, and I took a look at it, and I think it's a really good script. It's got the pixie and the chef hat, which is great. There's a couple of quirky things that I don't love, but like overall, I do think it's a good script.
So I don't know if it translated. Sorry, Jamie.
No, go for it.
I don't know. I don't know if it translated well to the audience or even to the good team. But as so spoiler alert, I was the evil poisoner this game, and it was so tense, but it was tense in the best way possible. Evil won that game, but it felt like at any given moment, Good talked about killing the Lleeches like 6 times. For the most part, the only reason why none of the evil, at one point, all 3 of the evil players were in a double claim, including for almost the entire game, myself and my demon were in a double claim for almost the entire game. It was one of those games that it just felt really good to get the win because you felt like you fought for it and you worked for it super hard and you earned it. Because evil controlled the narrative, and it's very rare for evil to control the narrative for the entire game, especially when you had such things like you being in double claims and your demon getting executed on day 1 but not dying because they're the leech. But it just so happens that the tea lady is sitting right next to your demon, and there's a pixie that's a bluff, so your other minion can just claim to be the tea lady pixie because they're already claiming to be tea lady anyways, so why not? And you are the poisoner that picks Lycanthropes from the very beginning without knowing the bluffs, and just so happens to poison the goon the same day your demon kills them. It was a lot of those things that shouldn't have happened, but they all just fell in place, and it just felt satisfying at the end.
Right.
And I don't know if it felt the same way for Good, but from everyone I talked to, Good didn't feel cheated. Good didn't feel robbed. Maybe there was a couple people who maybe thought that some of the edge cases. I mean, there's a very popular opinion that there shouldn't be more than one alignment changing role in a script, but what can you do?
What's this one got apart from the goon?
This one just has a goon, I think.
Is it just a goon? I don't know why. So I vaguely remember people being a little bit upset that was it this game? I play so much Clocktower, y'all. I play so much Clocktower. No, I'm pretty sure.
I was panicking a lot in Storyteller's Nightmare because the demon was bluffing. Oh yeah, that's fair.
What?
There's a politician.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Because there was a poly in play, and there was a goon. That was the thing. Because even though the politician didn't really do anything, I maintain the politician did absolutely nothing this game-wise when it comes to causing chaos. It does, I can understand why it would feel bad when you get the reveal. Oh, there's a politician and a goon switched. But, sometimes I think that discussion takes away from the evil plays. Right? Because it sucks when it's only the good townsfolk or the politician that wins the game. But at the same time, in this game in particular, I think evil did a hell of a job to even be viable. Maybe I'm biased because I was evil. I can't tell you that.
I actually have a question for you about the game,
yeah.
Dakota. How did you feel when you discovered that you died to a gossip as the poisoner?
I think it was the right choice.
Yeah.
Personally. Because I've hindsight, it was the right choice. At the time, I think it was meant to signal me that I turned Kohav. But I think that's how Capelli ran it. I haven't watched it back, so I don't know Capelli's thoughts. I'm working only on my memories and my thoughts as a player. But I at the time I didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, I gotta have a gossip. Cool. That means we're winning. That means evil is on the up because a lot of times when it comes to little monster kills and it comes to gossip kills, evil only dies when good needs help. Relatively, that's a pretty popular medieval thing, right? So I kind of took it as like, okay, that means good is losing. I don't know how, because at the time we were in a place where I was trying really hard to convince town that Tyler was good. I don't know if you guys got to hear my conversations with Jess and my conversations with Kohov, but I was really, really, really pushing I'm the lycanthrope. Maybe Jan is the politician, but Tyler is definitely the pixie. 1000% was the pixie. Um, so yeah, that was my opinion on that gossip kill. I thought it was fine.
All right. Just curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it actually as a balancing decision watching it. I do think that like the storyteller's job in general is to keep the game balanced for both teams. Gossip is a townsfolk ability. Obviously, killing a minion with a gossip is incredibly strong, but I think when you have an additional good player and like I think, Jan's kills were incredible. Like he just took out every single power roll like again and again and again on the good team. And then the other thing that I thought about there is, when somebody dies in the night, oftentimes good players will say, oh, well, you died in the night, so you're probably good, and then share more information with you. So that benefits evil. Not to mention that with you dying in the night, because it's a leech game and a good player is the leech host, it is not ruling out an additional leech host candidate for the good team. So I did think that, like, in light of all of those things, it was actually a, relatively rare situation where it was actually, like, not the worst thing in the world for a minion to be killed by a townsfolk ability. But yeah, overall, definitely could sort of see, and even here watching it back, like, a little bit of sort of, like, disappointment / confusion of, like, I'm a minion. I died in the night. Like what? Like that shouldn't have happened. And it is kind of like feels weird. But I do think at the end of the day was a very good balancing decision, especially looking at how the rest of the game went, where like evil really, like even though you had these double claims, like really dominated the game in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you had two dead evil players from early on, which although I don't know when Kohav learnt the evil team, but that was obviously something that really helped evil to control parts of the game. I've actually got the game open now, and a dog has just walked into shot on Ellie's camera. I didn't notice that live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they think it's all over is a really good script for the most part because there's nothing that's jumping out to me that's like I would change this. Like yes, I'm interested to hear Alejo's thoughts on some of the mechanics, some of the edge cases, but like as playing that script, that felt like just a really good Clocktower game to me.
I have a couple
So like
big ones, but we can get into that.
yeah, please do, because I don't think there's really much more to talk about the game unless you have any other big thoughts on it. I think that was just a really good game wise, right? Like I said,
Sure.
I did not watch the stream, so I don't know from a chat perspective if there's any like major things that you would change from the setup. But as playing the game, it felt like a good game.
I think there really was. There were no major decisions that were taken. Capelli did change the demon after handing out rolls, seeing that it was next to the tea lady. Not sure how necessarily in the spirit of the competition that is, but it is what it is. He, like we were saying earlier, he was really pushing to make the best use of those five changes, which was a radical departure from Ben's technique, which may or may not go on to show the influence that the storyteller is going to have on this competition. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's too much to say about the game. really. Emily is the philosopher choosing the the fortune teller's
teller.
ability. With a Leech in play was a little bit unfortunate for the good team, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's still quite strong. It was unlucky that like she hit the red herring and then outed that information, because that just like got her killed instantly. Because she did get one night of good information, and like, you know, in light of hitting the red herring, that was in a sense also good information. It did also really, really hurt that she hit Sam the red herring fool with Ekin, because Ekin was the Shab candidate, and was doing really strong work for the town. And I think that also, to me at least, comes down to play styles, where like, if you have a social read that the person claiming gossip is good, and or have like any sort of mechanical reasons to believe that it might not be a Shab game, for me in a game, I often don't really have any interest of killing that, because like, if Ekin's a Shab, he's not going anywhere. And if he's good, he's helping good. So like, I wouldn't want to kill that, but watching the stream back, it seemed like, at least from the conversations that we got insight into as viewers, it seemed like people were really interested in ruling out Ekin as a Shab candidate, which I understand from a player's standpoint, but isn't necessarily like how I personally prefer to play the game. But getting into sort of characters and interactions that I think are a struggle on this script, the really like glaring one for me is the Lycanthrope. Because the Lycanthrope, I think, plays very badly with the Gossip. I think it plays very badly with the Shab. I think it plays very, very, very badly with Legion. And yeah, I think that it is very difficult to be a Lycanthrope whose ability helps the town significantly on this script without being incredibly damaging to many other characters.
I do think it's a problem with Lycanthrope in general. There's very few scripts that the Lycanthrope sits comfortably on, and that's kind of the nature of the of experimental characters, right? But like, I have had some good Lycanthrope games. I've seen some scripted Lycanthrope on it that I enjoyed, but I think that's just the problem with the Lycanthrope, is it's hard to balance.
I think that's okay though, right? Like, this is maybe a hot take, but I genuinely don't think that like every character in Clocktower should work with every other character in Clocktower. Like, I don't think you should be able to take every character and just like plop it on a script with literally anything else and have it like be balanced and fun and like good to like create good interactions. But I do think what that means is that when you have a character that's as sort of like selective as the Lycanthrope in like what other characters it works with, that like you actually need to be really, really intentional about what scripts it's on, what interactions are coming out of that. Because I agree, like the Lycanthrope, when it works amazing. It is a really powerful, really interesting character, and in a lot of ways, like it can solve games. I had a Lycanthrope game the other night where like I was choosing between 2 or 3 different people, happened to pick the demon, and they were the first person that didn't die to my pick, and I woke up dead, and I was like, this person is evil, and we ended up killing them, and we like basically got lucky that that was the demon as opposed to one of the other people I could pick. But like, that aside, yeah, I think that like, you know, if a Lycanthrope kills a good player and the Gossip was true, that Gossip doesn't go off. You've completely taken the Gossip ability out of the game. If it's a Shab game and the Lycan kills, you're like, oh, cool, the Lycan quill went through. You have literally no information about what type of demon you're up against until the Lycan misses. And if the Lycan misses late enough that those 2 kills take you down to final 2, like, oops, you just lost. Like, if it's Legion, you can literally end the game by yourself if you target the other good players. Like, I think the Lycan is really, really, really damaging in those particular situations to the good team. And I would love to see it. I haven't thought enough about like what would add to this script in a good way, but I think specifically the Lycanthrope, it's very hard for it to be an effective townsfolk with this combination of characters.
And I think that's the benefit of this kind of competition, right? If they think it's all over, goes through, they'll have that time to replace it and change it and make it maybe think themselves what they can replace Lycanthrope with. Or if the writer of the script so chooses, they could just leave it as is. They don't have to replace it Lycanthrope. I think I agree with you that they should, but that is their prerogative in the end if it goes through. Alejo, do you have any major opinions on the script itself or the game before we move on to the second game?
A couple. The first one is one that we had in the previous script, which is that I personally, and it's a personal dislike of mine, I don't love Poison the Leech, just because puts you into that Immortal Leech situation if the evil team coordinate a play, which is basically game. But worse than that, I think, is Leech Goon. The Leech can, hitting the Goon, if they've been outed and they don't know there's a Goon, then they can just sink the game for not only themselves and their team, but also that Goon. Because there's no kill in the night. There are other reasons why that might happen on this script, but sometimes you might just want to check, execute that Leech, or just get lucky and happen to execute that Leech that day, and that's game. I don't know. I just don't like situations where the Leech can become immortal. There's not really a neat workaround for it, and any workaround that you try is a home rule, and I don't know what's a house rule. Sorry, and I don't know what the position of that is in this competition. But it's just my preference to not have immortal Leeches. But we've already discussed that a little bit. The other thing that I find interesting on the script is the Barber. Barber and Leech is really quite fun. It lets you put a new demon, lets you put a new host into play in the middle of the game. On the other hand, Barber and Puka is a little bit less great, because that Puka killing the Barber just nullifies it. It's like Puka Poppy Grower, but obviously not nearly as bad.
Yeah, Puka is a demon, in my opinion, that you have to be very careful what rules you put with it. And I agree with you, Jamie, that like maybe that's good for some characters. And I think for Puka, I like the Puka. I think the Puka is a really good demon. But I don't know. You have to be it interacts with its poison in a very unique way that no other demon really does. So it's a very interesting demon to craft a script around, in my opinion.
I've gone on record before saying that the Puka is my favorite demon, and I stand by that. But it can be a little bit of a headache sometimes as a storyteller.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we need to talk about, or can we move to Storyteller's Nightmare?
We're good to go.
Let's go for it. Let's chat about STNM.
All right. So, Okay, so Alejo, do you mind giving us the brief overview on this script from your perspective as the creator?
Right. This is actually an older version of the script, but the core concept has remained unchanged since the first edition. It is intended to be a script which is as difficult as possible for the storyteller to run. It has a few funky special rules. It has a couple of weird, tricky interactions that you need to know, like Vortox Poppy Grower. There is like little traps, little tricks for you as a storyteller to be careful of. And there's also just so many things that you need to follow. You need to follow the Mazephyles, you need to follow the Mutant, the Pixie, the Serenova's target. You need to follow... You just need to be basically everywhere. The idea is that you have a million things to be doing at any given time. Most of the characters wake in the night, so you need to be careful about how you wake them. You need to make a lot of decisions, which can be really tricky decisions to make. And just to make it extra fun, there's a couple of special rules, which you can watch the game to find out, I'm sure. So that's the idea. But all of that while still being a playable and functional script. And there are a couple of changes that I have made since this went out, and a couple of changes that I intend to make in the future. But that's possibly something to talk about at another time. So that is the idea of the script.
So I believe that the ruling for the World Cup was that no house rules would be included. The only added things would if the script maker included Fabled, they would include those, but no house rules would be followed. So that is the one difference to how Storyteller Nightmares ran normally than it was in this aspect, this concept, this time. I guess is the best way to say that. The thing I love about Storyteller's Nightmare is that for a script that wasn't supposed to be ran, it was just made as like kind of like a thought experiment. It runs surprisingly smooth. Would you agree, Jamsey?
Yeah, I think STNM as a player, and I've played it both in person and online quite a few times now. I think as a player, it can be a really, really fun script, and sort of like at least the way that I have experienced it, like the thing that is sort of memey and like jokey behind it is that it is really, it's basically like, let's think of all the most hard things for a storyteller to manage and like put them all together. And so I do think that like some of those things, obviously, like it factors into a lot of the characters in the game, of course, but in the context of like trying to evaluate it as a script, I do feel like some of those things almost took away from it a little bit. Like having the Buddhist in, I think, is really fun when you're running it as like a challenge for the storyteller, because it's just like a silly thing that you deal with. But in the context of like yesterday's game, it actually felt very like almost out of place, because it was sort of like, well, it's not actually doing anything mechanically in the context of the game. And instead, we're just sort of having this weird like interlude before we continue playing the game at the start of each day. So I do wonder if maybe for the sake of like what this competition is geared towards, that it just felt a bit out of place. So I don't know what that means for seeing it in the future. Because like when I have played Storyteller's Nightmare both in person and online, like the Buddhist can be really, really fun. It's a very silly thing to have involved. But I think that also comes from the sort of feeling that like as players, we're all in on the joke of like making the storyteller's life really hard. And that didn't really feel like the vibe of the game that we played on the Saturday mega stream.
Okay, so I know Leo said they're going to take a little bit backseat, so I'm going to hop in and give my opinion. That is why I personally, and I love Storyteller Nightmare. I think it's a really, like you said, I think it's a real fun thing that when played correctly, it feels like a big giant joke. It feels different than any other script I've ever played or watched played, which is just, it feels like a giant joke that we're all in on. We're all having a good time. Haha, the storyteller made a mistake. Ha, we gotcha, storyteller. But you're still playing Clocktower at the same time, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think, and the reason why I personally would choose the other script over this one to go forward. Spoiler, that's how I would vote. What, Leo?
They think it's all over the other script.
Yeah, they think it's all over. I think that Storyteller Nightmare, at its core, was built around that idea of making it hard for the storyteller. And while it is replayable, I think that the thing that makes it replayable is that it is a decent script that has a fun gimmick. Whereas I think they think it's all over, if refined, could just be a good script. It doesn't rely on a gimmick necessarily to move it forward. I think that the game 2 of the mega stream was fun. It was a decent game. I'm blanking on some of the big moments because I've watched so much Clocktower over the last couple days and played so much Clocktower. My brain is fried, and that's gonna be the entirety of this entire World Cup. Is everyone watching so much Clocktower that we're gonna have Clocktower coming out of our eyeballs. But I just think that at least in this game, they think it's all over just kind of hit truer home to me than this running a Storyteller's Nightmare. I don't know if it's because of the World Cup parameters or if it's because I had a really, really good game in the other script. But for my personal sensibilities, I think that they think it's all over was the better script and better game yesterday.
Interesting. I think
What is your opinion, Katie?
I think I fall on the other side of that for a couple of reasons. Although I do think that one of the big things that did happen, speaking about sort of bigger moments in STNM was that at the end of that game, it did feel a little bit like the outsiders in STNM, because we had I think it was a Godfather +1, and we had a Butler, a Mutant, and a Lunatic.
Yep.
Especially like Tapir figuring out that he was the Lunatic and then targeting Jan the Puka and having Jan not die. Like, that was arguably the most damning thing that the good team uncovered information-wise in the entire game. And like, and granted, like, trusting Tapir came down to a social read. I don't think there was anything mechanical that made Tapir the Lunatic. Obviously, for me as the Mutant, figuring out that gambling was the Godfather and knowing, like, I could sort of argue for that, but like, I was alive the entire game. I couldn't like formally come out as the Mutant in any way. And like, did have to sort of back into an actual townsfolk claim in order to be kind of proven to be, like, in order to not be executed, basically. It was, I think the evil team definitely took some, like, there was definitely some frustration there with feeling like, you know, of all of the good team members that could have, you know, brought the evil team down, it was the outsiders whose abilities are supposed to help evil. Which, like, is understandable that that's not a fun experience for the evil team. And obviously, like, if you're a demon and you're trying to follow your lunatic's kills and then they pick you, like, that's good for the lunatic for figuring it out. Like, there's not a lot to do in that regard. But yeah, I feel like Storyteller's Nightmare as a script just has so many interesting interactions. And granted, I recognize that I hold a lot of bias from, like, having played it many times. I think it's a lot of fun to play. I think it's always an interesting game. I think especially the potential of having quite a few evils, like, really keeps you on the edge of your seat and makes you be a lot more intentional about decisions when executing, which I really like. Like, the demon in this case was bluffing Bounty Hunter. And if I believe that Jan is the Bounty Hunter, then there's an evil townsfolk somewhere. If I think we have a politician, that means that politician can flip. If I think we have a Mizefles as well, then that could be another player that's turned, which means that we could be like, we could have 6 evils right now. And like, if that's true, if we have 5 or 6 evils, like, we need to be so intentional about who we are, like, who we're killing every single day. And I think that sort of urgency in like who is being executed, like, that really appeals to the way that I like to play Clocktower, of like, let's be so smart and so thorough with like what we're doing at any given point.
And I think that's a really good distinction right there, because that's not how I play Clocktower, because that's not how my brain works. But that's not a bad thing either way. And I think that both of these games, game 1 and game 2, matchups, matchup 1, matchup 2, had 2 different scripts going against each other. So with the first one, right, with Horrifying Spectacle and Out of Evil, you had Horrifying Spectacle, which was a lot on like the interactions amongst the characters, and Out of Evil with the whole evil mechanic. Whereas with these 2 scripts, at least how they played out, right, Storyteller Nightmare was a lot more of the intentional decisions you made. And yes, while the end did feel a little bit bad for the evil team, I do maintain the fact that good team had the demon on the block at least like 2 or 3 times at the end of that game, to the point where, like, I was watching it in watch party with Navian and Skills, and the 3 of us were like, are we gonna have to start early? Are we gonna, like, we asked if we had to start early 4 times in that last 20 minutes of that game, because that's how it felt watching it. Whereas when it comes to They Think It's All Over, it was very much more of a social read and more of a, like, the evil team pointing out worldviews that caused the good team to get in their own head and circle around. It was 2 very different games, is I think the point I'm trying to point out. It just depends on what your taste in Clocktower is. And I personally think that I would rather play They Think It's All Over, that game again, than be in the game as Storyteller Nightmare, because of how my brain works. I love the script. I think Storyteller Nightmare is a good script, and I think it's a very good gimmick and mechanic. But I think with changes, I think you can really boil They Think It's All Over down to become a really, really good script, and I really want to see that. I think I want to see They Think It's All Over win because I want to see what the scriptwriter can do to make it even better. If that makes sense. I know what Story Nightmare can be, and I'm sure, Alejo, you're going to make more additions and you're going to make it better and refine it as much as possible. But the potential of They Think It's All Over is what drawing me to They Think It's All Over.
I mean, this competition is about finding the script with the most potential to improve over the course of the World Cup, right?
That's one of the reasons for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I can see that. I think for sure, like if you take off the Lycan or if you make a lot of changes to make the Lycan viable on the script, I also think the pacifist on the script, there obviously wasn't a pacifist in play or being used as a bluff in the game that we saw on Saturday, but I do think that pacifist, when you have both a leech and a DA on the script, is, unless you're going to literally use it to save like every single time a good player is executed, in which case like the tea lady is just sort of a glorified like neighbor monk at night if their neighbors are good. Like pacifist, I don't really see having a good place on this script because it's just going to prevent the good team from getting really important information from tea lady or like DA leech type executions. So yeah, I think that's a bit tricky as well. I also agree with Alejo's point about the barber just no longer is an outsider to the town if it's a puka, and arguably is a townsfolk if they identify that it is a puka game. Although that said, like there's no actual signal to the good team that a barber swap has gone through, so I do think that can be, it's more the idea of the barber that kind of stokes fear and confusion and opens up worldviews as opposed to the actual, like, unless you know it's a puka. Like, let's say the fool dies first and people have mechanical reason to trust the fool. In that case, like, that's just, yeah, then the barber's just kind of a villager, basically, like no positive, no negative. But yeah, I do think as far as potential goes, there's certainly some things that can be played with on this script, but I do think there are also some kind of major changes that I would want to see before seeing it like really progress or be played again. The last thing I think for now, at least with this script, is that watching the game back, I think it is always kind of just a feels bad situation when it is the final day for your team and you don't know that. And that was something that I saw for the good team in that game, where Final 5 was the final chance that the good team had to execute the Leech Host, and they had no idea. And I don't think it feels good to wake up on Final 3 and find out, oh, the game is already over, and it's not even because there are 3 evil players alive. And granted, like, that is always a risk on a script with a DA. I think the evil team played extremely well in that game, and I don't want to take anything away from the evil team, because, like, all 3 of you and Kohav, even, like, as the goon brought onto the evil team, like, everyone on evil did a really incredible job socially and mechanically. Like, Jan's kills, again, were spot on. Like, he took out every single role that was gathering information, like, extremely quickly, extremely efficiently. Your poisons turned the goon, and the fact that you were able to, like, die to the gossip and then seamlessly transition into world building and, like, reading as good and continuing to get good players, like, on your side. Tyler's DA protections, like, everything the evil team did was done incredibly well. And at the same time, like, I couldn't help but feel really bad for the good team that, like, they had no idea and no real way of knowing because of, like, basically because the evil players used their abilities, the good team was, like, essentially, it felt like fully prevented from identifying, like, A, that it was a leech, and B, that there was a DA who could be protecting Leech Host, so that going into Final 3, it was like, yeah, like, if you go into Final 3 knowing that 2 evil players are dead, like, you should feel like, oh, we have some sort of chance. Like, they're, like, I think it's somewhat unreasonable to expect that Final 5 is the last day that you have to execute the demon if 2 evil players are dead already. And the fact that that was a situation that happened, like, didn't feel great from, like, a fun and fairness standpoint.
I will say that I said it at the outset, and I will repeat here, I am biased because I had a really, really good game in a script that is this competition. And this is one of the reasons why I'm not going to be voting at all, because I will be playing in a lot of these games, right? And for me, and I don't think it's bad if you play and you vote, but for me, I am very much aware that a really good game will cloud my judgment. So I am biased because I had a really, really good game, but I can see why it may not have been. I wouldn't say fun. It feels bad because I don't think from watching it, from talking to the players, I don't think Good didn't have fun. But I can see why it feels bad to wake up and be like, oh, well, that was a game. Fuck.
Yeah, and I think that's what was so wild to me, because I'm looking at this and like I don't think, like, looking at this combination of characters, that it's inherently like really evil balanced as a script. Like there's a lot of power on the good team in this script. I think also like removing the lycanthrope and the pacifist maybe, and like putting in some other characters, you can add some more power as well. It was just really kind of like a wild ride to watch, and to be like, oh wow, like it doesn't feel like the good team is weak in any way, and yet like here we are in this position where like you pointed out, Coda, earlier, like the demon and the poisoner are in a hard double claim. The DA is claiming Tea Lady, Pixie Tea Lady, but like hasn't been tested and is just living all game. Like for all intents and purposes, watching it back, like it seems like, yeah, the evil team's in dire straits. Like surely like they're going to execute the demon because like he's double claiming the poisoner who died in the night. Like it just, and yet like final 5 was the last day, and that it felt very like I was very just kind of like wait, what, the whole time, because it was like, based on those things on paper, it seems like it should be a balanced game, or if anything, good has the edge, because like evil's bluffs are overlapping in a way that points out that there's evil players in those pairs, and there's like a Tea Lady DA type claim, and like the first Tea Lady died immediately, but then the Pixie Tea Lady is just alive. Like so many things about it seemed like it should have been really balanced or good flavored, and then in practice it felt extremely balanced towards evil. And I do again want to give the evil team a lot of credit for playing incredibly well. But there's a part of me that's kind of sitting with like, if an evil team is that powerful, what needs to change on this script in order for the good team to balance that out, to actually have a fair shot at winning the game?
Yeah. Alejo,
Right.
do you have any opinions on either of these two scripts, knowing that you're biased because you created one of them?
Right, of course. I think that the author of They Think It's All Over has done a really good job. There's a couple of things that are a little bit funky that can be ironed out over the course of the competition. I did not submit Storyteller's Nightmare expecting to win. I will be, I'm happy to go as far as I can go. If I were voting, and I'm obviously not going to vote on this, I honestly don't know which way I'd go. Obviously I'd want to do well, but at the same time, the author of this script has made a good script. It is probably a better script. So I would probably tend to agree with you, Dakota, that I think probably They Think It's All Over is the one that is the better script here as a script.
Well, there you have it. That's our opinions on those two matchups. Before we say goodbye and bid you adieu, would you all like to talk about the upcoming games? As you are listening to this, it is either late Sunday evening or Monday at some point during the day in America time zones. Obviously, if you're in like Australia, it's probably like Thursday or something stupid because they're in the future. But as you go along your week, we have more World Cup games going forward. Today, as we're recording this, later today, as we're recording this, which will have happened which will have happened some point by the time you're listening to this, on Jamie B0TC, we'll have Minions Opinions versus Roundabout on Wednesday at 8 British Standard Time and 3 p.m. Eastern on Patters TTV. We'll have All the Worlds of Sage versus Hide and Seek, not Hide and Seek, Hide, and Seek. They're different scripts for some reason. Friday on Connecticut, Blood on the Clocktower at CT, or I think it's what? It's twitch.tv/CT Blood on the Clocktower. At 1 a.m. Saturday, British Standard Time, and 8 p.m. Eastern Friday, it's Sybil and the Serpent versus Outed. And then finally, for this gigantic week of Clocktower, on Off Meta, at 6 British Standard Time and 1 Eastern Time, it's True Colors versus Math is Hard. And that's pretty much it. That's the upcoming games. We have another full week of Clocktower World Cup. But that's the first two games, first two matchups.
It's not World Cup related, but if you did enjoy Storyteller's Nightmare, I know someone who's running it soon.
Oh no!
Probably tomorrow, as you're listening to this, unless you're listening to it in the future, in which case it happened ages ago.
Yeah, and hopefully I didn't fail. But yeah, we're really excited for this World Cup. I think it's always fun to have a reason to play more Clocktower, and I love especially just the entire like mentality behind having a competition that, like, yes, it's a competition. Yes, we're comparing things to one another, but at the same time, at its core, this is all about creating really interesting and really fun scripts with really unique and exciting interactions, and then making them better so that they're more fun and more exciting for everyone to play. So I love that, like, as a community, that is an endeavor that we have decided to undertake, that, like, we're actually really investing in our community members and in our scripts and in the process of script building in itself.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is only a good thing and not a bad thing in any way you can place it. But yeah, is there any other things you guys want to talk about before we wrap this up?
I don't think so. Looking forward to the next. God knows how long it's going to be of this. We're 2 games down. There's 64 strips in it, which means there are 61 games left to play. Yeah.
Which means we will at least be for the first round. And that's just the first round, Alejo. We'll be here.
No, that's not just the first round. There's 32 games in the first round, 16 in the second, 8 in the third, 4 in the quarterfinals, 2 in the semis, and 1 in the final.
I'm gonna go back to the name of the script that's being played on Saturday by Off Meta and just say math is hard.
Yeah, I'm American. I don't know math. Math isn't a real thing.
It's easy.
Here.
If you've got a single elimination competition where you play a game and one is eliminated and the other goes through, then the number of entries minus 1 is the number of games that need to be played.
If there's nothing else from Jamie, and there's nothing else from Alejo, I have been Dakota, one of your hosts here. Thank you for joining us on BOTC World Cup Weekly.